Before we begin, I want to share a resource that can make your divorce process far easier and much less stressful. It's Hello Divorce. Hello Divorce gives you a guided, step-by-step path through your divorce with clear instructions, simple online tools, and support from real legal and coaching professionals when you need it. You get help with paperwork, access to affordable legal advice, and a process that is designed to save you money, reduce conflict, and keep you informed every step of the way. They've created a special page just for Divorce and Beyond listeners. Visit hellodivorce.com/Susan to explore their plans, pricing, and resources so you can see exactly what fits your situation. If you want a clearer, calmer, more empowered way to move through your divorce, start at hellodivorce.com/Susan. Welcome to Divorce and Beyond, a podcast about navigating divorce and what comes next. I'm Susan Guthrie. I'm a divorce attorney and mediator, and for more than 3 decades, I've helped people navigate divorce with clarity, strategy, and compassion. Each episode offers practical insight into the legal, emotional, and life decisions that shape your future. So let's get started. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Divorce and Beyond. Today, we are talking about one of the most common and most emotionally complicated realities of divorce, and that is living together after you have decided the marriage is over. Often, you file the paperwork, you think everything is going to change, and then you walk back into the house and nothing has changed at all. You are still under the same roof, still sharing space, still navigating tension. In fact, that tension may have become worse. And if you do not handle it intentionally, it can become a daily emotional landmine. That's why I invited Jenny Stevens back to the show. Jenny is someone I deeply respect, both as a professional and as a friend. She is known as the champion of change because she helps people move through life's biggest transitions with clarity and steadiness. She is a divorce and co-parenting coach. She has a clinical background, advanced training in conflict management and communication, and years of experience guiding individuals and families through exactly this kind of moment. So today, we will break down what it really means to go from being partners to roommates in a way that makes it sustainable. We're going to talk about how to create boundaries, how to communicate without escalating, and how to protect your own emotional stability. If you are living under the same roof during divorce, this episode matters. Let's dive in. Jenny, so glad that you are back to help guide my listeners through this really sticky problem. This idea of continuing to live under the same roof once you're getting divorced, which is so common, is so thorny, so difficult. I know you even have clients right now that are going through it. I've seen people going through it, went through it myself when I got divorced. So thank you for coming back. I know you have some great golden nuggets for my listeners.
Awesome to be here. Always a pleasure. This is a great topic. So much information. And this is going to be good.
You know, we were just pre-tape talking, and we're in March when this episode will air, which we know is traditionally the month where there are the most filings of divorce. And a lot of people are very focused on the process. They're focused on filing for divorce. They think that's some magic thing that everything changes, yet they get back in their car or they turn off the computer once the papers are filed or whatever, and they find themselves still living under the same roof with the person they're now actually legally getting divorced from or not. I mean, even if the papers haven't been filed. And it feels like there's been some major shift. And in fact, emotionally, for at least one of them, there probably has been. but yet the logistics of living together are exactly the same and vastly different. And that's what we're diving into today, right? Like you from yesterday where you lived together to today where you're living together can
Mhm.
feel very, very different, yet in some ways look the same. And that often leads to a lot of conflict because people don't think about it. So we're
Yeah.
gonna, really get into, some of the specifics, but I just want to let's start at a high level. Many times people think, okay, the paperwork's been filed, everything will be different. And then they show up in the house living together still and nothing feels different. They're both still there. Their kids may still be there. Their stuff still maybe in the master bedroom closet or the primary bedroom closet. What's the first thing they need to start considering if they are for whatever reason still living under the same roof while the divorce is going on?
Yeah, and that's the first question that we get, what to do now that we filed and we've both decided that a divorce is imminent and is occurring. The first thing, it usually that someone has already said, I'm going to go into the guest room or I'm going to go into the basement. And if that hasn't happened before you both have attorneys, it's a really good idea to have that conversation very soon thereafter and decide who is willing. It's always willing. Nobody wants to leave the primary, we'll just use the word primary bedroom.
Yeah.
No one really wants to. Some people are like, yes, can't wait to go to the den. Give me an air mattress. So it really is dependent. But I usually find that it's either, yes, I'm anxious to get out of there, or I don't really want to go. So let's talk about the person who doesn't really want to go. It's important to have the conversation of like, will you go to the den or will you go to the basement? And once the person goes to the other space, everything, at least step number one, gets a little better because you physically have a separate space to sleep. We all know sleep's important. So I think that's the first thing you have to do. And then the second piece is it's important that you communicate the plan so you both have clear expectations because then we'll talk about it in a minute. Then it's like, who's using the bathroom and do you have a second bathroom? So, and then Susan and I were talking earlier, it's like the closet. Where are the clothes going to go?
Yeah, it becomes a matter, it's not just a different place to sleep. It really starts to feel like in that moment, you want some personal space. And that's not just for you physically while you sleep or while you're reading a book or where you just want to get away for a minute from the other person under that roof. You need some physical space for your
That's right.
belongings, for a feeling of privacy to hold, where your paperwork. So I've always said this to clients, and I'm wondering what you think is it's not simply a matter of separating out maybe your rooms, like go to the guest room, one stays in the primary or whatever that might be. But it's also having an understanding
Yeah.
between the two of you of personal space and privacy and respect for that.
I mean, yeah, that's it's a loaded statement. And it's a good statement. And to unpack that, if you ask both parties, they both want space and they both want a sanctuary. They want both not only want to have that privacy and their own sort of like sacred space, but a lot of people sometimes don't feel safe in situations. So it might just be it's also a question of where can I either like shut the door, lock the door, know that I'm not going to be interrupted. That's a big one. I just want to have a closed door. And once that's established, which again is not difficult to do, it's like, where do you go? What space in the home can be that for either person? And then again, creating and noticing like, if you have stuff in the guest room and the person's in the guest room, what are you gonna do? So there's always a transfer of like the logistical things. You're transferring clothes, you're transferring objects. And again, in a perfect world, we've got two adults behaving like two adults. I say adults because I'm punctuating that because when you're going through a divorce, we all know who is listening. You feel dysregulated anyway. And because divorce is such a massive disruption, number one. Number two, our living, our home is a very emotional thing and sleep. So you add those three things up. It's really, really important that number one, you're talking to each other about who's going where and which space can be dedicated for that person. And then, like Susan and I were saying before we started taping, it's important to navigate the triggers and challenges that you think are coming up. For example, if you've got in laws or people coming to the home sleeping, and people may not know that you're going through divorce, and they're like, why is Jenny sleeping in the basement? So you kind of have to anticipate things that are on the calendar coming up And so that's a whole nother, that could be another conversation about what to anticipate and what things are going to come up. We talked about like errands and home, like your house
Yeah, there's
expectations.
so much, but I think that starting with space, physical space, and I
Right.
do want to say that this episode is taking into consideration people who
Yeah.
are not in physical danger from their spouse.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
If you are, if this is a domestic violence or abuse situation, then we're talking about different logistics here. Obviously, physically separating
Yeah. The rules are
under,
different.
yeah, the rules
The
are
rules are
different.
different.
That's a different episode. This is the more common
Um,
situation of two people who no longer want to be married to each other. And it may be one who has a higher level of that than the other one who maybe doesn't want a divorce. We have all different levels of it. But two adults, as you said earlier, who now have to navigate the very difficult situation of continuing to cohabit while going through divorce. And I cannot underestimate, as I've seen it and as I experienced it, how important it is to have an agreement or an understanding around your personal space in the home. And
yes.
so that agreement, I think, needs to be overt, that if I'm staying in the guest room, I'm the one who's going to move out of the primary. I'm staying in the guest room. I'm going to move all my stuff there. You are not coming in the guest room. And I am no longer going into the primary bedroom,
Bingo.
right? And that needs to be overt. That needs to be stated and understood and agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many emails or letters I get that are like, "Oh, so and so went into my space and stuff," and that's a huge trigger for all the obvious reasons. It's a trigger. So if again, and I ideally, both people have accepted that the spaces are private, right? Private. That's again, like it's the easiest thing to say in theory. And then sometimes it's like, well, I forgot my so and so watch and stuff. And then again, if of course it's normal if you forget something. And then again, it goes back to like communication is key. And we all get that under divorcing folks, communication can be fuzzy, it can be blurry. And so it does take some forethought and intention about having those conversations. I always say have conversations in the morning after you've had your cup of coffee. Don't do it later in the afternoon or evening. Try and take 24 hours if you have something really difficult to say. And again, these situations are, folks who are not completely at real high conflict and like talking about those, their big ideas with a lot of more complicated things. And again, you don't have to get into like whether I'm going to pay this and child support. It's just like, here are two sacred spaces. Please respect it. Are there some upcoming challenges or things that we need to talk about as a couple that's going to uncouple? Again, and again, we all recognize some houses are bigger than others. Some people have an outdoor space, some people don't. So we also want to say, like, how do you do it in a 3-bedroom condo and how do you do it in a 5-bedroom home? So I have a lot of solution. I'm a solutions person. I love creating solutions for my clients when it is a small space. Sometimes the person has to go find an office down the street or in a coffee shop or go to a park. And how do you create those? How can you be creative regardless of the space that you're in? Because at the end of the day, like Susan said, everybody just wants their own space and they want that respect around it and not feel like, like come in or can I come in? You really, you need your own space when you're going through a divorce.
You need I mean, even just for that little moment to decompress
That's
with
right.
everything that's going on, you also need to be able to have a private space where you can go and talk to your attorney on a Zoom
That's
call
right.
if you need to, or whatever it is. I think you've used the key word here that I would recommend people try to keep at the top of all of this is respect.
Yeah. Respect.
You don't have to care about each other, love each other, do all the things that you're not feeling like doing right now, but you can be respectful of the agreements that you make with each other because it goes both ways.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so, but you've mentioned another aspect, and I will tell you, the bedroom thing is actually relatively simple to come up with
That's
something
the
that
easiest.
you
I think that's the
I
easiest of all
think
the
it's
things.
the easiest. And then the bathroom, I'll use the guest bathroom. I'll use the bathroom downstairs. If there's only one shower in the house, you put up a schedule. I mean, there's all different things that you
Yes.
can do. But The other thing, and probably the thing that causes much bigger conflicts, is this discussion I think that needs to be had around how are you going to conduct yourselves in the household. Most couples have a bifurcation of household duties, I'll call it. One person takes out the garbage. Let's use the stereotypes. Husband takes
Yeah.
out the garbage. Wife does the grocery shopping. Husband does the cooking. Wife cleans up after. Whatever these things are. Laundry. Oh, laundry
Oh,
has
yeah,
caused
laundry.
more
Laundry's
arguments
a
than, yeah.
mhm,
People
mhm.
do not want to do their soon to be ex spouse's laundry anymore. Let me just clue you all in, everyone, if
I
that's
can't
a surprise.
imagine why. I
Yeah.
can't imagine
Not
why.
looking forward to, washing your underwear ever
No,
again, not
no.
doing it. But they don't talk about it. And then people get upset because the expectations are still there, whether that makes sense that the expectations there or not. You said something earlier that I think is important is this concept of over communicating. Like
Yeah,
communicate and then communicate some more with as much calmness and respect, to go back to that
yeah.
word, as you can. So tell us a little more about that, because these are all triggers.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is an ongoing I have an ongoing case right now, and I'll tease you by saying it's the laundry and then the salami sandwich.
Yes.
So, the expectation is one of the parties does all the whites. It's so funny, it's the whites versus the darks,
Yep.
always is the sheets, the towels, and the whites. Well, the other person was mad that they didn't do the laundry. So the attorneys and I got on a call, and we decided to coach my client that if you're doing all the whites, it's just easier to do everyone's whites. Let's not make it a thing. And you don't need to do his underwear or her underwear. True story. Okay. But it didn't make sense to just like separate this person's whites because it was just going to be globally, it was just an easier decision for my client to make. And again, that was an interesting conversation and they felt supported. Number two, the salami sandwich. So the expectation was my client was to make lunch and have the food ready at a certain time. And when we were trying to, a lot of my couples some of my clients are in codependent relationships, which a lot of us were. I was in one and didn't know it. And so the expectation around when meals are prepped and when food is ready. So I was coaching my client that you don't have to make the salami sandwich anymore, but it was a thing. And I said, like, I'm teaching you guys, or, we're having this discussion, have the conversation. It doesn't feel really great to make lunch anymore for you as we are trying to uncouple and going out on our own. I'm happy to go to Whole Foods or the Jewel to get the food. Feel free to make your own. So that went well. But again, it's it's like these automatic errands or things that we do in the house, the sort of what do you call it? Like the invisible labor on both.
Yes.
This is not just gendered women and men. Like every person that lives under one roof have invisible labor. So it's important if you can make a list of those invisible labors, such as the grocery shopping, the meal planning, the laundry, Susan mentioned who does the dishes, who takes the trash out, who takes, like, if you have animals, like the dog thing has come up with some other clients, like so and so always takes the dogs to the vet.
Yep.
So
You got to
again,
do
those types
that.
of things, we can exhaust a list on that. That would help your listeners. Again, sometimes it's a day to day, hour to hour. Like, we don't expect you guys to think of everything, but as you navigate, again, if the principles are, it's important to have your own space and respect that. Number one. Number two, to unpack and make a list of the invisible labors that both parties are doing and make a list of things that if you can have a conversation about, it feels better for everybody. And then, the kid piece is a separate episode.
I mean, it's a simple concept that you're talking about, but I
Yes.
think so important is consciousness of the issues before they become arguments or conflicts, right? I can guarantee you, Jenny can guarantee you that this expectation that everyone will continue to do what they've always been doing is going to lead to conflict if you don't talk about it and come to understandings ahead of time. So the key here is think about these things that you've always done, and then think about what you're willing to continue doing and what you
Yeah.
think for the good of all, for the getting along under the same roof, or what you just truly can't do anymore. But don't just stop doing it. Talk about it. We're going to take a quick break so you can hear from one of our sponsors. But before we do, I want to make sure you grab the companion resources for this episode. If you are living under the same roof while divorcing, I created a blog and a downloadable guide just for you. It is called the Under One Roof Divorce Survival Guide, and it walks you through the 7 ground rules we are discussing today with worksheets you can actually use to set boundaries and reduce conflict. You can find both the blog and the free download on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com. Just head to the latest episode page. And when we come back, we are going to talk about the mistake most couples make at the very end of this phase, when tensions tend to spike just as the divorce is almost final. That part is critical, so stay with us. We will be right back. You all know I love to treat myself, and my go-to jewelry brand is Yumi. It's timeless, elegant, and the perfect reminder that you deserve something beautiful, especially for your beyond. So I'm excited to say my listeners get an exclusive discount at divorcebeyond.com/YumiU, that's YUMIYU, by using the code BEYOND at checkout.
Susan, you said a really important word, willing.
Yes.
Willing, and I would say willing and capable, right?
Very
Willing
good.
and capable. I have a client right now who broke her leg. Well, when you break a leg, you can't, and if it's your dominant leg, you can't do as much as what you once did. So again, you have to be ready for curveballs as well, like the broken legs curveball, right?
Welcome to life, right?
Well, welcome to, like, my internet just went out for 4.5 hours, and
Right.
I said to Susan, I am practice every skill and strategy that I've ever told my clients in the last 3 hours, and it worked to, it's, 90%
It
of the time.
works, folks.
Yeah, it works, and it takes some training. Yeah, and again, the thing about divorce is you're already under a lot of stress, and so we're asking a lot of you, and it's just like, if you can think about it, when you prep for an appointment or you prep for a marathon or you prep for anything, if you can think about being prepared when you are separating spaces, there are things that go along with it. So I think when, I'm divorced, when I went and hired my divorce attorney, she didn't say, hey, you should think about these 5 things. Cause I personally know living under the roof was a very difficult thing. We did it. And the one thing I'll share is family dinners. Our girls were young. And my ex-husband he was the cook, and I don't really cook that well. And so family dinners were just the same thing because it made sense for our family. It made sense for my kids. Just so it was not it didn't need to be discussed because my kids should not, no one should eat. Well, I'm not the best cook. We'll leave it at that. So, but that was an easy, smooth thing. Susan's laughing right now. It was just a smooth thing. But had I, that's that's a layup, right? So think about when you're in you're in these situations, if taking the dog out for the walk or taking the dog to the vet, if you and your kids that's an easy thing. You don't disrupt something that works really well. Like Susan mentioned, really unpack and make a list of the things that if you are not willing to do X, Y, and Z, you don't have to do it. And it's important to explicitly say that, like very overtly. I'm no longer going to make the salami sandwich, but I will go make, but when I go to the grocery store, I'm more than happy to pick up food for our family. Because, we were online before. Some of these, Susan might bring this up. Sometimes people get into, well, it's a lot about power, okay?
Right.
And it's about relinquishing control. And sometimes clients can be petty and make an impulsive decision that is not good for the long run. Susan, take it away.
Well, yes, and it goes back to that respect thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a client that I had toward the end of my practice career when
Mhm.
I was her attorney as she and her husband were going through mediation. And one of the things that the husband started to do, he became very sloppy and very messy and
Mhm.
very disrespectful, I'll call it, of the shared space in the home. He left empty beer bottles all over. He left dirty plates in the family room. And this was really upsetting to my client Less on her behalf, but because they had 2 young daughters and the house was always a constant mess. Now, let me point out, this was not a man who was generally messy. So the belief
Mm,
was he was
mm.
doing this to
To
push her
poke.
buttons.
He was poking the bear.
He was poking the bear, and I've said this
Poke.
to clients, and I bet you've said something similar to clients a million times, Jenny. Who knows you better to know how to push your buttons
Exactly.
than
That
the
person.
person you're getting divorced from? And
Exactly.
but she only yelled at him about it. She only suffered in silence about it before she started yelling about it. They never sat down and discussed it, and we actually ended up having to have an entire 2-hour mediation session that the attorneys came to about this particular issue
Yeah.
because it had driven so much conflict in the household that we were actually getting to a point where we were worried we were going to have some court intervention and something would go on, which was going to be very difficult for this family.
Well,
So
and Susan, real quick, was that at the end of the divorce?
no, it was getting closer to the end of the divorce, but it went
Because
on for quite some time.
yeah, it seems also in my anecdotal, like, historical like library at the end of living together when you know it's almost done, I always see flare ups at the end. Like I always see the bad behavior that we were trying to mitigate initially. The bad behavior seems to kind of explode toward the end. So there's probably a thing about that. So if you are at the end of your divorce and you're hanging on by a thread and can't wait to move out, it's like just hang on, people, and like remember self-preservation. How do you control your own self? You're not managing the other person. I don't know. Have you ever seen that, Susan? At the end, things
Oh
flare up more
god,
at the end.
always. There's this
Always?
even if
There you
you're
go.
always. I mean, I've seen this whether it's a mediated divorce, a negotiated
See?
divorce, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. People when they have been going through the process, they've kind of been on auto, pilot, and then
Yeah.
suddenly the end is in sight and behavior ramps up. And
Yeah.
it's a human thing where it's another big change is about to happen, right?
That's right.
They've
That's
almost
right.
gotten used to living in limbo. And now the change is going to happen where they're actually divorced, and it can bring about a lot more emotion. Change is hard.
Yeah.
Suddenly, limbo is normal to you because you've been living this way for a year or whatever.
Well, that's the thing, like this, the person who has to do it for 6 months versus 18 months or 12 months, because one of the person, if not both, are moving in that space. It goes back to, home is where your heart is. You kind of like home is where your safety, like, are you both moving out? And that anticipatory grief or that anticipatory fear,
Happens all the
it
time. But
happens all the time.
The thing that keeps coming back to me, because with the case that I was involved in, the bad behavior on the part of the husband, I'm just going to use that as my example here, right?
Okay.
He had been making a mess and being disrespectful in the home in those, like, undermining kind of ways, right?
Like the jabby ways.
She was unable to talk to him about it until she exploded, and then it was screaming matches and things like that on her part. It goes back to, I think, what you said, and it's probably one of the most important things here in this episode is the communication in
Yeah.
the right way around these things. So you're counseling a client right now about these difficult conversations that, by the way, everyone, are going to feel never ending and like they have to happen every single day because you're living this life. So these
Yeah.
conversations are going to be ongoing. What are your top tips for how to have these conversations in ways that don't actually exacerbate it, but are productive and helpful and respectful?
Great question. We'll refer back to Bill Eddy and the BIF method. I mean, so you have to communicate, if possible, with brief, informative, friendly, and firm. So if you're a client out there with an OFW, if you're using the messaging system OFW, always, always, always. And if you're not using an OFW and you're emailing or Google stuff or even texting, it needs to be not emotional. I say always. I'm not an attorney, but because I work with people, I feel like think of it like an attorney. It needs to be facts. Like, I'll give you an example in a second. So make sure you start with the facts and then go with the request and then say a nicety. It's not like, have a great day. I miss you so much. It's more of just like the bedroom's a mess. The kids have to be blah, blah, blah. Will you please? So it's state the fact. ask your request, and then if you want to close it with a friendly statement. But sometimes, sometimes people can take an inch and then take a mile. So at minimum, you start with the fact and then ask the request.
Right. But the fact isn't, you're a pig, you're a slob. You
No accusations. So you'd
Right.
never accuse somebody. And then the other rule of thumb is you don't drudge up the past. So again, that's a whole nother episode, but you don't drudge up the past. You state the current fact that's happening, right? The electricity went out and we have no internet. Can you please bring so-and-so to the library to do his homework? I mean, it's simple as that. You don't go into the past. So if you can talk like that on text or email, and of course in person, sometimes like these curveballs, when someone breaks a leg and falls down the stairs, we're not asking that person it's like, help, I need to go to the hospital. So Susan and I are just throwing out a bunch of different scenarios. If nothing else, state the fact, ask for the request.
I think
And then,
that's
yeah, I
oh,
think I think those are the easiest things to do. And then remember, don't attach yourself to the outcome of what the other person's going to say. Don't ruminate and wait for the message to come in. Don't stare at your phone and ruminate. Why haven't they texted me an answer? You have to do those two things and then let it go. And if for some reason there's not a response in the timely manner, sometimes you have to ask somebody else for the help.
right.
So again, you can't rely on the person that you've been, like Susan said this eloquently a few minutes ago. The traditions and the standards and the things that you have been doing as a married couple change. Therefore, you bring up new norms and there's new rules. And so your real life timing coming up with new situations and new things. So if you always start with respect and you assume best intentions, don't assume ill will, and you comport yourself in the way that you want to be treated and respected, hopefully things go well. But again, if they don't, that is not on you. When someone treats you poorly and acts like a jerk to you, it's more about them, not so much about you.
It's
And
all
again,
about them.
right, be easy for you and I to say, hard to do, like
It
Susan and
is.
I were talking about, under the same roof, not the easiest thing to do.
That is a critical point. Look, we are giving tips, we're giving
Yeah,
ideas, we're
yeah,
trying to spark for you all who are listening an
yeah,
idea and understanding of just what this is going to look like as you continue to live under the same roof for what can drag on to be a very long period of time, and give you some ideas of how to deal with what are sure to feel like very uncomfortable and
yeah,
difficult and sometimes angering types of behaviors and things that are going on. The thing that I have also
yes.
said to clients to try to work into the conversation, I wonder what your thoughts are on this, is to think of a transition in the relationship of the two adults in the house, the two people getting divorced, as going from partners to roommates in this
Mm,
situation, and to treat each other with the respect you would treat to a roommate. So, such as, or office mates, colleagues, right? If your colleague in the refrigerator has written their name on the paper bag with their leftovers in it that they brought for lunch, your colleague would not go eat that, right? That's clear, that's understood. You would not do that. I told you about my case, Jenny, and I'm going to tell the listeners now. I literally had a case in my practice where one of the clients called the police on the other parent, on the other person in the household because they ate their leftovers out of the fridge. The police came, these two were screaming at each other. The two children were there as the police were navigating the case of these stolen leftovers between
I
their
hope it was a good
parents.
left. Yeah, I hope it
It
was like,
was fish. It was
oh,
leftover fish, which, by the way, I don't even take fish home from restaurants because it's never going
yeah,
to be good the next day. But
yeah, fair.
so that idea that I want to throw out for people is, can you come to an understanding and have a discussion, going back to Jenny's overly communicate?
Overly
Can you
communicate.
say to each other, let's treat each other with the respect of roommates and colleagues?
I like that roommate. I think the roommate is a little softer than a colleague. I think the roommate is a great analogy. I truly do, because we all at some point in our life have had roommates, and I like that partner. You're making the switch partner to roommate, and that's, I think, a palatable I think that's an easy transition in our brains. You know what I mean? Because some people get offended if I'll sometimes use the analogy. I want you to treat the person like the post person, right? When you see your post person, you're like, hey, how are you? Because sometimes my clients have to treat their soon to be ex in that manner. And I think because we're talking about more normal, nothing's normal, but more clients who are not super high conflict right now,
Right.
I think the roommate analogy is the best one I would use because we've all had roommates and it's really easy to say, I really love my fish from the thing, please don't eat it. I mean, sure, put a post note on it. But as roommates, you might know, hey, Susan loves to take home fish, wink, wink. Don't eat her
Don't eat
takeover.
her fish.
Right. Don't eat the takeovers. And if one person, like you mentioned, one person might be a slob or messy and one person might not be. And then, you can navigate that. As roommates, you can be like, it's Sunday. You told me you would, blah, blah, blah. I was always a neat person. So I always had roommates sometimes that weren't as neat as me because my expectations are pretty high. And it was like once a week, the house was cleaned. Everybody did this thing once a week or twice a week because we all were trying to respect one another. So I really like the thing. And you are transitioning to roommates. And then once you both get to leave and move out, then
And
and
your
then you're
colleagues,
co-parent.
really. If you're
Yeah, yeah,
parents, I always say you're
colleague.
in the business of raising children now, and
You
you are
are a colleague.
colleagues in that relationship. So that's
I
a good
like that.
metaphor.
It's a great metaphor.
Another aspect of this, and I do want to make sure everyone knows, we are not talking necessarily in this episode about co-parenting under the same roof as you go
Mm.
through divorce. I have a wonderful episode with Christina McGee, our favorite parenting
Yeah.
expert. I will link in the show notes to that episode, and that's very much focused on how to co-parent your children while they are navigating all of you living under the same roof. That's a great episode. But it does also, though, however, come up, Jenny, that when you have parents living under this roof, there's also in the realm of communicating, there's communicating that needs to go on, explaining this new dynamic maybe between the parents of being roommates,
Right.
mom living in a different room from mom or dad or, those situations. Do you believe in that overly communicate or having a shared narrative with your kids for that as well?
Yes, 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 and then always consider the ages. So if there's, littles under the age of 6, it's easy or just to say, maybe somebody snores or someone's got an early morning meeting. And then it's different if you've told the kids that you guys are divorcing, because eventually you should and will, depending on the timing. It's
Yeah.
easy
That's
then.
another episode with Christina, everyone.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll link to
Christina.
that one as well.
Yeah. So exactly. So then, if the kids know or even don't know, yes, have the same narrative. Because I have a client now that was like, my kid came up and was wondering why so and so they caught the one parent running from a guest room to the other room because they didn't want someone to know. So again, not a terrible thing, but a very normal thing. So again, get in front of that and yes, have a unified message for sure. And then if the kids are older, that's a different message, right? I think older kids know and feel things. Again, Christina talks about that a lot. I mean, if they're an older kid, it doesn't take rocket science to be like, why is my one parent sleeping in a different space?
Have the age appropriate discussion, but understand that changes in the household, even though the family's still living together, are changes that are also in your children's world as well and sphere. And so there may be conversations that are appropriate to have with them about the different, the changes that are happening between their parents' relationship.
Yeah, and then on that note, again, I'm not going to go into it, but it's like when what you're talking about, I've seen like it's like the bedroom routine, the bath routine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like who does what. So it's. Make sure you all listen to that episode because it's what Susan's referring to. There's another layer of things that happen in the house once you have separate spaces because the kids are like, wait, I can't find mom or I can't find dad or wait, So
Yeah.
again, thoughtful. It's another thoughtful topic to think about as you change bedrooms and change spaces in the house because it does affect. I mean, I study group systems. I mean, your home is a system.
Right.
You're one
Very
unit,
much.
and then you have there's a transition and a disruption within that group. So it's important to think about all aspects of that group, all aspects of your family, and how it can affect each person.
I think that's a critical point and one of the reasons why, let me just say, why it can be so helpful to have a coach while you're
Yeah.
going through divorce, right? Jenny, we've talked a lot about the fact that you are right now working with clients in this exact space, talking about all of these, ins and outs of this. The value of having someone that you can talk through this, mushy landscape. Like you feel like
Mushy
you're stepping,
landscape. Mhm.
right? You feel like you're stepping through a house you have lived in maybe for decades, yet everything is different in that household. Everything is different. Every door you open the room looks different now. And
Yeah.
it's because you're looking through it through a very different lens. And so, yes, there are conversations you need to have with your spouse, but the value of having them and plotting them out and strategizing them with your coach ahead of time. Oh my God. It can
Yeah,
be
I
the
mean,
difference between
yeah.
navigating this well and a total disaster,
Yeah,
folks.
yeah, well said, and I do that all day, every day. It's also attorneys. It's important to ask your attorney to do the attorney thing, and sometimes my attorney colleagues and friends, they're expensive to walk through their
Oh,
clients with these types of things. So Susan's laughing because she knows what I'm saying.
yeah.
So if you can't afford or don't have the access of hiring a coach, even when you're in mediation, the mediator can help with these types of things. It goes back to having a good team approach and to know who to hire for what and who can help me with these issues versus who can help me with those issues. And we always say, don't tell too many people and get too many opinions because every single one of these divorces, for all of you who are listening, your separation under this house is different than what happened in my divorce or the neighbor's divorce. So a lot of times we sometimes grasp for straws when we don't know what to do. So it's important to know whether I should hire a coach and have a good therapist or whether is my mediator going to help me with these things because what Susan and I were talking about before we went live is these 6 months or 12 months or 18 months divorcing under the same roof, in my personal opinion, was one of the hardest things about my divorce. It's always it's like a marathon. It's like we got to get our clients through that piece because then when people launch and they live in separate spaces, you really physically, emotionally feel very different. And then there's another subset of rules that you can talk about then. But I do think that it's like, how do you feel protected and supported in the time that you guys are under one roof?
Yeah.
It's
It
important.
it's so important. And you've
It's so
said
important.
something that I didn't say, and I'm surprised at myself for not saying it, but I think it's really important,
What did
is
I say?
this is key stuff that you can work through with your mediator.
Oh,
And
yeah,
this
of
is
course.
this is fantastic. Well, I'm the mediator in the room here, suddenly,
Susan is a
folks.
mediator, people.
Yeah,
She's a
I
mediator.
tell you that the coach and your coach is critical, but the value of sitting with your mediator and spending a couple of hours of setting ground rules around how you're going to cohabit is so worth the money if you can avoid the minefield of living together without those ground rules, without those boundaries, without those understandings, and without an agreement on how to be respectful of each other's space. Take the time with your mediator. Have these discussions if you two can't have them together face to face or in email or in, our family wizard, like Jenny mentioned. Have them with your mediator. Have them with your mediator.
Especially when you're hiring a mediator, I am a trained mediator and I use my skills all the time. But when you are hiring a mediator, they're doing an individual session with each person and then a joint. And one of the first sessions are always about the living, the red hot button. So it's a great idea just to lay it all out there in
Yeah.
either your individual meeting or in that first joint meeting, because like Susan said, it does set the tone, but it's great to have a neutral party helping clients navigate that or separate coaches or, if you're in collab, you have a neutral coach. So it's sort of, it's wise.
It's worth the money, I promise you. Because here's the thing, if you are daily under that same roof, living in this feeling of discomfort and conflict, and it's just rising, and then you're sitting down and trying to negotiate your divorce, I guarantee you that it will get harder and harder to negotiate a settlement as you are getting more and more uncomfortable, angry, upset, emotional around the living situation.
That's
And
right. Well, that's right.
it's just it's too tied together. Yet many people ignore the fact of how uncomfortable it can be in that living situation. Sometimes your attorneys will be just like, suck it up and deal with it. Sometimes
Yeah.
your family is just like, well, you just got to do what you got to do. Just ignore it. Do those things. Being able to actually discuss it like grown-ups, have a communication around it, however that works, and come to agreements and try to live by them is the best way for all of you if you can.
That's
And
right.
you can't have those conversations when you're angry. You'll just end up screaming. You'll just end up exacerbating the conflict. So getting the help.
It's like temporary pain. What's that saying? Like, it's like temporary pain for like long-term gain. Like, it
Yeah.
really is. It can feel like forever, but it's not. Again, like, when you're 10,000 feet above, ground level, it's like, you'll be, oh, how did I do that? But you did it, and you did it for the sake of the kids, right? You did it because it's expensive you can't just get up and leave your kids when you're going through a divorce, right? The kids need the parents. So remember, it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And it's important just to have these skills, some strategies, know who to ask for what, and then set the time. Again, I call them courageous conversations. It's hard to have difficult conversations, and we all can do hard things, and it will pay off to have those conversations. Again, not hoping that the person's perfect across the street from or across the way in the same house, but if you set that tone and you set your boundaries and agenda and your hopes, your goals and concerns, again, ideally, then the person wants to match it because it works. Your
Right.
kids benefit, you feel better. And again, you said something that made me think about something. These things are hard to talk about, but if you have time set aside, I always say this during the day, like, you need to focus on the stuff during the day before the kids come home from soccer practice or volleyball and somebody breaks a leg. Have the conversations during the day when you're feeling regulated, again, with the right person, and then have the conversation and set the norms and rules and then be done with it. You don't want to go back and exhaust it and say, you ate my fish out of the
I'm
refrigerator,
calling the
right?
cops.
Well, I'm calling the cops. And if that happens, if I'm coaching you and I'm the bird on your shoulder, I'd say address it in an email later in the morning. Don't explode, right? Because life happens. But to dedicate a certain amount of time each day or each week to those, yeah, I'll call it like we called it, like the partners to the roommates. Have that time, and then periodically you have to check in on those things, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks. Say, how are we doing? How are we doing? Like, my laundry, blah, 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 the groceries, if ideally, again, you would talk about things every few weeks, even once a week, and say, what's working, what's not working.
Right.
Because again,
And
yeah, it's
I'm
not hard
thinking
once
about
you
the
do.
people out there who are eye rolling, going, I
I
am not
know.
sitting down with them and having
I,
a chat. You know what? Then calmly put it down in an email.
yeah.
Let that email sit for a minute. Go back and look at it and denastify it. Take out like all of the, like Jenny talked about earlier, and then send it so that at least you're opening the lines of communication.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Again, it's easy. It's better to write it down in an email if you can. And then, because our emotions are pretty, right, dysregulated sometimes, especially at
Yeah.
5 o'clock at night when you got a bunch of stuff happening. And so it's better. It's better.
We have, that so many things. And
Yeah.
guys, we've really scratched the surface of what this situation is like. And for those of you who are in this situation, you know what we mean. It's a daily thing. Something's going to pop up daily, right? Your toothpaste is going to disappear because they came and took it out of the bathroom and took it downstairs to the other bathroom or whatever it is. It's going to be a constant. What really matters is your awareness of the fact that you need to come to agreement, you need to have boundaries, you need to have respect, you need to establish that roommate relationship if you can, and get the coach. Jenny, you work with a lot of people. We talked about this going through divorce. You work remotely, so you work with people all over the country.
I do. I
Tell us
do.
about your practice.
So I coach folks going through significant changes, so divorces and beyond. But most of my cases are people going through divorces and high conflict. And then I teach people skills and strategies in coping. Like, how do you cope when you're going through a divorce? Again, pre, during, and post. And again, I just do a lot of, given my extensive background in school counseling and working with families and adolescents, my sweet spot is helping folks learn how to communicate with their soon-to-be exes and how to do it so you can thrive and feel healthy, so your kids feel good. You want to feel good, but it's also important that your kids feel good. Everybody says, no one calls me and says, help me get divorced so I can feel great. They say, help me divorce so my kids won't suffer and hurt. And I then say, don't you want help feeling good about this process? And then the outcome is your kids' benefit. So I love what I do. It's great work.
Some brilliant person came up with the fact that you are the champion of change. And and I want people to know that.
And her name is Susan Guthrie. That is a true story. So I am you're a mentor, a friend, a colleague, all the above. And you are, you coined me the champion of change years ago. And that's for another, I think I actually talked about that, but thank you.
We have an
Thank you
episode, folks. We have an episode where Jenny talks about why she's the champion of change. And I encourage you, and we'll link to that episode as well. Jenny's been on the podcast many times. That one will tell you a few of the very difficult challenges Jenny has had to face when she went through her tsunami of change, as we call it.
That's another one. Susan, right? You're so good with names.
Oh, you had a year, man. You had a year.
Yeah.
You've had a lot, but thank you so much. I'm going to put your contact information, all of your links and everything in the show notes for everyone. It's jennystevenscoach.com. I will tag your Instagram as well, but I want to make sure they go to the website so they can get in touch with you. Follow Jenny on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us again, Jenny. This topic, this is an evergreen.
Yes, it is. You're the best. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thanks so much. Before we close today, I want to leave you with a few golden nuggets that I hope you carry with you. First, if you are divorcing and still living under the same roof, this is not a failure of planning. It is very often a practical reality, but practicality does not eliminate emotional complexity. You must approach this chapter intentionally. Second, structure is not rigidity. Structure is protection. Clear physical space, clear household expectations, and clear communication. When ambiguity disappears, escalation decreases, and that protects not only your peace, but your negotiating position and your long-term stability. Third, mindset matters. The shift from partners to roommates is more than symbolic. It is strategic. When you treat the relationship as a temporary cohabitation arrangement instead of a dissolving marriage, you reduce emotional charge and increase clarity. Fourth, remember, this is transitional. It may feel endless when you are in it, but it is not permanent. The goal is not to make this chapter comfortable. The goal is to move through it without creating unnecessary damage. If this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to visit divorceandbeyondpod.com and go to the latest episode page. You will find the companion blog, and you can download the free Under One Roof Divorce Survival Guide. It gives you the 7 ground rules we discussed today, along with practical worksheets to help you implement them immediately. And as always, my sincere thanks to Jenny Stevens for joining us again. Jenny brings lived experience, clinical insight, and grounded wisdom to some of the most difficult moments people face. I am always grateful for her voice in this space. To those of you navigating this right now, hear me clearly. You can do hard things. With clarity, boundaries, and intention, you can move through this chapter with your dignity and your future intact. If today's episode helped you see something more clearly, take a moment to reflect on one insight you can carry forward, one decision you can approach differently, one next step that feels more grounded. Divorce is not a failure. It is about facing reality and choosing a healthier path forward for yourself and your family. You can find show notes, trusted divorce resources and expert guidance at divorceandbeyondpod.com. If this episode was helpful, follow the podcast and share it with someone who may need support right now. I'm Susan Guthrie. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next time with more clarity, insight, and support on Divorce and Beyond.